Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Music for a Book podcast, Season 3. We are your hosts. I'm Britt.
And I'm Hannah.
And every 2 weeks, we read and review a book, assign a song to that book, draw the parallels between the two, and have some fun along the way. So welcome back to Season 3, Episode 3, the third and final episode in our spooky series and our Halloween episode.
Yes. And this week, we finish off our spooky series with a book that we're still trying to piece together. Rabbit holes down Reddit, everything. It's a lot of fun. And this book is called We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kliewer.
So excited to talk about this one. I feel like this is probably a book, in comparison to every book that we've read on the podcast, that we can have the most theories about and still have no solid answer. So
Yep. Yes.
I can't wait.
Yes.
So if you guys are new or you just need a refresher, how this episode is going to work is we are going to go over trigger warnings in a brief synopsis for the book. Then we're going to reveal our song choices, which is our favorite part of the podcast. And then we're going to go into what we like to call spoiler territory, meaning anything and everything that happens cover to cover inside this bad boy right here, we're going to be talking about. And there are so many links and ties and clues. We both have consumed this in 2 different formats, and so we have a lot to discuss. So if you haven't read the book, and we highly recommend that you do, you're going to need to pause the podcast there and come back once you have to make sure that we don't spoil anything.
Yes, because we will spoil things right away in this one. And if you want a happily ever after, this is not going to be it. This is not going to be it.
This is a horror novel, and it's not like gruesome or anything, but it's definitely unsettling and spooky.
Yeah.
So.
Yes.
Dear reader.
So some book themes and warnings. To grab this from Storygraph. Forced institution. Forced going to a psych ward, gaslighting, mental illness, homophobia, violence, religious bigotry, animal cruelty, it's not a funny subject matter at all, guys, but
it's not.
I can't talk. Death, alcohol, and forced institutionalization.
Beautiful. Also, if you guys are watching this, did you notice that we have a little special something going on? We're debuting the folklore cardigan today.
Yes.
All right. A brief synopsis. We grabbed this one from Goodreads. This is going to be a fucking mess. All right. As a young queer couple who flips houses, Charlie and Eve can't believe... No. Everything is fine.
Okay, we're good. We're good.
Yeah, we're totally fine. Okay.
All right, let me try it again.
No, we can do this. We can do this.
As a young queer couple who flips houses, Charlie and Eve can't believe the killer deal they've just got on an old house in a picturesque neighborhood. As they're working on renovations, one day there's a knock at the door. A man stands there with his family, claiming to have lived here years before, and asking if it would be all right if he showed his kids around. People pleaser to a fault, Eve lets them in. As soon as the strangers enter the home, uncanny and inexplicable things start happening, including the family's youngest child going missing and a ghostly presence materializing in the basement. Even weirder, the family can't seem to take the hint that their visit should be over, and when Charlie suddenly vanishes, Eve slowly loses her grip on reality. Something is terribly wrong with the house and with the visiting family. Or is Eve just imagining things?
Dun dun dun.
I'm glad we made it to that.
We kind of did. Everything's fine. So now we're going to talk about our song choices for the book. And for once I found a song, I was chilling. I was good. Now, I feel like we had opposite experiences this time.
Yes.
So I went the route of searching up playlists and stuff for movies and vibes that I feel like had a similar feel. So I actually found this song and decided to pick it off of a playlist from The Strangers, because it felt very much like The Strangers-esque to me. And so my song this week is Trouble by Cage the Elephant.
Okay. I know the band. I don't know if I know the song. Maybe I know it.
You might, but...
I went through like a million songs. Literally, I thought I had a song yesterday, and I was listening to music today, and I was, after like going through the book basically a third time, this is what I landed on. And I really like the vibe. I'll tell you my honorable mentions.
Yes, please.
First, 2 Taylor songs I was going back and forth, My Tears Ricochet and Question.
Ooh.
Interesting, right? And then Down with the Sickness by Disturbed.
Mm-hmm.
But I ended up going with Stuck in the Middle with You by Steeler's Wheel.
I feel like we went for a very similar vibe.
Yes, similar vibes we landed on.
Similar vibes. Yep. As soon as you said that, I was like, that sounds very similar to this. I'm excited to hear you talk about that song though, because I immediately started singing the chorus in my head once you said it. So I am excited to hear how we feel like this ties back. Now, everyone, buckle up, strap in. We're about to take you on a journey. We're about to take you on a journey through a book that we still don't fully understand.
Nope.
I've listened to it twice on audio and skimmed through the book. Hannah's listened to it on audio, is almost done listening to it again, and has almost basically reread the book while writing our outline.
Yes.
So we both consumed this about 3 times, and we still have more questions than answers. So this is going to be a really speculative episode. We're definitely going to talk about the plot, but there's so many open-ended pieces.
Yes.
And so many theories.
So yes, do not continue unless you want to be spoiled. But
yes,
if you want to kind of hear our take before you read it or listen to it, you could do that too, because you're still going to be confused going through.
And I also think that if you listen to us talk about the plot, it won't necessarily take away from the creepy factor of being like strung together for you.
Yeah, but I highly recommend reading this book first, especially, I mean, you could read it in a day.
Yes.
But yes,
and it's
continue on with us, whether you read the book or not, because we are going to take you to Heritage Lane.
We sure are. And who knows what the address is?
Yep.
No one fucking knows.
Nope.
All right. So first thing that I do want to say is because we consumed this in both physical and audio format, I think that there are advantages and disadvantages to both now that I've done it. And if you're a person who likes to reread books and like really get into it, I would recommend doing both. I would personally recommend listening to it on audio for the immersive experience first and like just how fucking creepy this book is, and then going back and rereading it and seeing the actual physical clues and codes and ciphers and shit that's left in the book by the author. You miss all of that when you listen to it on audio.
Yeah. No, this is definitely one that I love, that I consumed it both ways, because listening to it, I was like in shock, just like standing there. And then reading it, I like picked up on so much more different things. And the documents in it are really cool.
Yes. Yep.
This was a trip.
Mm-hmm.
Before we jump to how the ending was, how do you feel about the way the book ended?
So the only thing that I knew going into this book was that it was very, like, it's being very hyped up for spooky season for good reason, in my opinion. And the ending was controversial and a lot of people didn't like it. I personally am in the camp that I actually liked it. And I think that surprised me because I was prepared knowing that the ending was controversial and knowing that people didn't like it, because the ending it stops. The book stops and you're like, that's it? Like, that's fucking it? What are we doing? So I did end up liking it though, because especially upon listening again and really diving in, there's so much that leads up to that point and so many things that point back to where we started that I think it's really open. And honestly, so this book too, if you guys didn't know, Marcus Kliewer, this is his debut novel. However, this story originated on Reddit. He posted this originally on Reddit, and as he was writing this story, people were giving feedback and theories and thoughts about what was happening, and so he molded and shaped the story as it went. And I heard that this is not like a standalone, that there might be a sequel for it. So I think that shaped my perception of the ending a little bit.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I too saw people kind of like polar opposites. Either people are like, this is 5-star, best read of 2024, and people are like, no, this book sucked. Or I'm in the first category. Just spoiling that for everybody right now.
Yeah, we love it. So we have a few characters. In these characters, I don't know how we always end up reading books that we have to say, AKA this person,
I know,
AKA that person, and give them 18 nicknames. But in this case, like, these might all be the same person. They might not be the same person. They could be in multiple timelines. Who knows? We're going to talk about it. We're just going to do like an overview of like the main folks that we're going to talk about here.
So we have our main character, our girl Eve. Like we said in the synopsis, her and her partner Charlie or Charlotte live in this house. And the family that used to live there before, well, really it was just the father. So the father's name is Thomas, and he is married to Paige, and they have 3 kids. 2 boys, Newton and Kai, and a daughter, Jenny. And that's kind of like our core group of people.
Yes.
Eve does have some alternative names that we'll throw out later down the road. And Thomas has a supposed sister as well that could be Eve. I don't know. So, you know what? We don't know. We don't know. We will
really
talk
don't
about
know.
what we think later on, but we don't know who these people are.
Yes.
None of these people.
Yep. And there is one other small little character. It's not a real character, but we do have Mo. And Mo is a toy from Eve's childhood. It's a little monkey. In my head, as this was being described with symbols, yeah, it looked creepy as hell. It looked like it escaped from a 3-ring circus that is off the beaten path. Lorcan would not be at that circus.
No,
but like it felt very creepy to me. But specifically, Eve's has off-white fur and has very specific qualities that she remembers about him. But she cannot find that he existed anywhere. But he does have fun little... He pops up in her brain as like a secondary voice.
Yeah,
basically.
she's like, her inner monologue is like that little like monkey on her shoulder.
Yes.
Right, that keeps talking to her.
But it's the monkey with the symbols.
Yep.
So
we start off. And so these chapters, like, I love chapters that have titles.
Me too.
Not just like chapter 1. Because it just, I feel like it gives so much more to what we're going to be reading about.
Also, as we get started here, just wanted to let you guys know that we are deep in the Reddit forums, like Hannah said earlier about this. So we are using the r/horror lit by Spooky Fork, talking about like some of the spoilers, the discussion from them, some of the references that they have, some of the things people use. And also there's, what's the other one called that you just sent me today? Old House.
Oh yeah, the Old House Archive. That's like
Old
the
House
official
Archive.
one. That's like
Yes.
for Marcus Kliewer officially.
Yeah. Yes. So we are using that as reference points as well as the book itself because there's so much going on here.
So the first line of this book though got me.
Yes.
Because it's just, they'd rung the doorbell unannounced on a chilly Friday night. Nope. Immediate nope.
Do not let people into your home that you don't know. I am a faulty people pleaser, you guys. I took a very long time to learn how to say no to people. And even I, on like my worst people pleasing journey at the height of my steamroller era, where anyone could say anything, you're not getting into my fucking house. Like,
No.
And
so on top of that too, like Eve noticed that there was no car in like the driveway that brought this family.
Yes.
And like the dad's like, oh yeah, we parked on the road because it was too icy.
But you hiked up with your small children?
Okay, suspicious. And like Eve talks about how she calls it her broken spidey sense, and she notices like irrelevant details. And so for like when she first meets Thomas, the father, she notices dirt on the father's coat. And so when I remember hearing that the first time and kind of glossed over, but when I reread it, I tried to pick up on some details that she points out. One thing I noticed, I'm going to bring it up now because I kind of highlighted throughout, is the color green. A lot of things are green.
Interesting.
So
I don't know if I necessarily picked up on all of the green clues.
It didn't happen till like later on, but then I started like noticing it more.
Yeah. Interesting. But yeah, so Eve says like she remembers stories of this happening, aka like I mentioned earlier, the strangers. Like this was kind of the vibe that I got. And she was like, why would they bring their small children to murder me? That feels a little gratuitous. Like, you know. And so she tries to play the my girlfriend says I can't. It's like when you would ask your parents if you could go to a sleepover and you didn't want to go, so you would go ask your mom and be like, Mom, I'm asking you, but say no because I don't want to go. And then Eve takes a look at the look on little Jenny's face and gives in, tells them they have 15 minutes. And I'm just confused because Jenny didn't live there.
Right?
Why is she so compelled to see things in this house if she didn't live there?
Yeah. We talked about it earlier, but there are various documents throughout the book. So it goes like usually chapter, document, chapter, document, chapter, document. So we'll flip between those. Just side note for everybody there. The first document we have is a real estate listing for the house, which is just nothing too crazy in it, but it is a real estate listing for the house of 3709.
Yes.
Address is important.
Address is very important, 3709.
But the website that it was on is no longer operational.
And this is a very secluded house. Like, this is in a place that's been called, their realtor told them it was called Stray Dog Summit. But we find out as we go, like, she has an interaction with her neighbor, and her neighbor's like, the fuck? I've lived here for years, and I've never heard that term before. And so it's very interesting, but I was reading some theories about Stray Dog Summit and what it actually could mean. And I do think there's a little bit more to it than that, but that's just a little mention as we move forward. Everyone listening is going to be like have like a web that they have to put together for all the things that were like, hold on to that thought. We're going to come back to it.
So Thomas says make himself at home. He like takes off his jacket, opens a closet, hangs up their jackets, and weirdly it comforts Eve. And it's like, oh, yep, he did live here.
I do get that.
Yeah, like, but I don't know. I'd still be like, get out, get out, get out.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't have let them in the first place. But like, I get where like her brain was like, okay, he knows where things are. He's comfortable here. Yeah. I get it, but also
he's not. Yeah. And even Charlie are still like moving in. They're trying to decide what they want to do with the house in general. They have a dog named Shiloh. And Thomas talks about how he had a dog named Buckley. And there was a document about how they need to rehome him as well. She also noticed Thomas taking a pill. That was one of her like little notices. And just all these like weird little things that she is picking up on watching this family interact with her belongings.
Now they're doing like this tour, and at some point she like leaves them to their own devices. Thomas does ask her about a dumbwaiter that used to be functional in the house, and Eve is confused because she's like, what are you talking about? It's still there, but it's just covered up. There's also little things like Thomas mentions that there are little symbols, almost like glyphs, carved into places, and he says that was done by his sister. And then Jenny also calls Eve Emma right out of the gate.
Yeah. And the one Reddit thread is interesting about that too. We'll bring that up later, but
yes,
stick a little note there. And then Jenny runs to the basement, even though Eve is like, let's not go to the basement. We got a lot of dangerous stuff down there. And Jenny plays hide and seek a lot, apparently. And goes down there, hides, and Thomas and Eve go looking for her in the basement. And then this part freaked me out as the start of my like mini little freakouts. So Eve finds Thomas down there, like standing still and just not responding in the creepy basement.
Yeah. Where his daughter has run away and is hiding. And he has not a care in the world about his child's safety and well-being. He's like, it's fine.
She'll come out. She has her flashlight pen. It'll be fine.
We'll find her. Don't worry.
Yeah. And Eve also is like nervous that Jenny's going to get hurt and like come back and like the family will sue them and everything.
Yeah. Now, okay, I kind of want to just, I feel like in order to keep everything straight, we're going to have to talk about some things, some theories early, because otherwise we're just going to like, it's going to be too much. So the basement itself, there's like multiple thoughts and things, but there's something that happens in the basement a little bit later that we're going to talk about. But specifically, like Thomas in the basement, there's a figure that she ends up seeing in just a little bit here in the basement. I feel like the basement has to be, personally, some sort of like portal or hub for whatever's happening, whether it's strictly paranormal, whether it's like weird like timeline glitches. The reason I lean toward timeline glitches is because how much the Mandela effect is spoken about coming up here. And I think a little bit of paranormal, but really like multiple timelines occurring almost simultaneously, like one on top of the other. And that basement almost acts as like a you go down and then you come up and you're in a different timeline sort of
Yeah.
situation.
Did you watch The Umbrella Academy at all?
I have not. I've been wanting to for a long time.
It's not really a spoiler because I won't go too in depth in like why, but there is
Yeah.
like a subway that like they go to, and you can
Mm-hmm.
go to all these different like timelines. And so that's
Yeah.
what it made me think of too, is like just all these things and the same people and different.
Yeah. So that was, I just had to get that out now because I know that I'm going to forget to mention something later.
So Charlie ends up coming home,
hmm
and Eve thinks it's weird, like you said, Britt, that the family doesn't is like concerned about Jenny. They're like, well, if we just like eat and we have dinner, she'll come up, she'll be fine. The family ends up staying for dinner because Charlie's like, oh yeah, it's fine, because Eve said Charlie wasn't okay with it, but she never actually got a hold of her. And they just have like awkward dinner conversations. Paige is like adamant they say like an official grace, and then just see it come off like really religious. And Paige asks if Eve's parents are okay with her and Charlie's lifestyle. And Charlie's like, are your parents okay with your lifestyle? Love this, Charlie. And then little Jenny comes up during dinner just saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And she just appears.
There's something weird about Jenny. I feel like Jenny is weird.
Yeah.
Like, she is young, so I think that there could be the reasonable thought that, like, when you're younger, you're more susceptible to paranormal happenings and things like that. So she might be seeing and picking up on different things. But there was something about her, like, I didn't care what the other two boys were doing. Jenny was the one who, like, really freaked me out.
Yeah. So later on, too, they point out, I don't know if it's in the beginning, because I didn't catch on to this till like later, like the green thing.
Yeah.
They do say like later that she has green eyes. And so like I wonder if I want to reread this book again.
I know.
And see what they talk about like Jenny throughout too, because I think I missed a lot with her the first couple times around.
There's also too, like, the family ends up leaving, but they don't actually leave. They come back.
Because there's the weather alert that the bridge is closed.
Yeah.
Come back.
And like there's also this like kind of thought that Eve goes through because she remembers a story about her uncle Benji and the way that Charlie like discredited his paranormal experiences as he was telling them, rather than just letting like a chill old man basically just be okay. Like, he had a paranormal story, he was excited to tell it, and Charlie was like, dude, like, it was a fucking owl, you didn't see anything, more or less. And I think it's interesting, and I feel like that was done intentionally to make Charlie seem like a very logical, reasonable, skeptical person, and not necessarily for like anything within the story itself. Maybe a little bit, of stuff that they see in the forest, but I think that really just set up the fact that Charlie is a skeptic.
Yeah.
100%.
And we also get a document on laser tattoo removal. And at this point, we find out that Paige had one removed on her neck, like a penny-sized circle. But I feel like that doc is important later on as well, too.
Yes.
So, of course, the bridge is closed, so the family ends up spending the night. Eve is very suspicious, but Charlie's like, nah, it's fine. It's okay. And they have this conversation about how there's really no known photos of Eve except the one that's in Charlie's locket.
And it's the only known photo of Eve Palmer. Like, it's intentional, and like, it's just, guys, it's just fucking weird. Everything in this book is so weird.
Yeah. And then our little buddy Shiloh, she alerts them to something outside. And, it's our lovely father. It's Thomas.
Of course it is.
Just standing outside again. But he asks, where's Allison? Who's Allison?
Who is she? And then we get a very interesting document on sleep paralysis. And it's also interesting to note, I think that like titles are going to come into play of the documents at some point, whether we decode it or not. I don't think we've mentioned this yet, but like I said earlier, when we said that there's an advantage to listening and an advantage to reading, disadvantages to both, at the end of these documents, what I didn't know was weird. They put it through as like weird, almost like a fax machine sound in the audiobook, is Morse code
Yep.
that was left at the end of each document that was put in with an intentional message.
Yes. And so after they kind of get Thomas out of his little sleepwalking, him, Charlie, and Eve talk about how Thomas kind of brought up to Eve, like, did you notice anything weird? Like, I don't think this house was haunted, but like, there's just the symbols are odd that are carved around the house. And so he does talk about Allison and how he felt her core memories were changing.
Mm-hmm.
That like her parents were her parents, that these like religious zealots like came in, overtook them, that her brother wasn't her brother, that he like it turned out like really weird, and her core memories changed, and people she known all her life become strangers, and strangers became familiar, and it was a lot of stuff going on, which is interesting that almost overnight Allison felt like everything was altered.
Yes. And like little pieces that started to feel off, and she had a very different recollection of like what was actually, taking place than what people were telling her she was experiencing. And in this case, we always say things like perception is reality. In like when you're talking about life, people's perceptions are the realities. But here, like the perceptions that everyone has of everything are so vastly different, and there are so many potential outcomes, timelines, just weird situations where this makes you question everything. It makes you question everyone. The one reason that I think makes it harder to decipher is the fact that this is written in third person as well. So we're not actually getting like truly inside of the heads of anyone in particular.
Except 2 chapters are written in first person,
which
is interesting.
Very interesting.
So later that night, Eve like goes and kind of checks out the house, and she sees something in the basement. She thinks it's Jenny at first, like it's a child-size shadow, but then it like morphs into an adult-sized thing, right? Just like a shadow apparition, whatever she sees. And then she just slams the door, goes to tell Charlie there's something in the basement. Charlie's like, it's nothing. It's nothing. We'll check in the morning. Like the actual morning, it's 3 a.m. and Eve's just like freaking out. But she trusts Charlie, right? And Charlie, like we said, is a skeptic. So she's like, it's fine, Eve, it's fine. Like, let's just go to bed.
Yeah. And in her head, too, the voice of Mo is telling her once they're in, they never leave. And like, that's her, when she said she had a broken spidey sense, I think that that's like the voice in her head that's taken on, the form of Mo. But it's like, you have to hide. Once they're in, they never leave. And the apparition, the figure, the person on the stairs was probably the first time that I was like, oh, this is horrifying.
The next 2 documents are about 2 different fires that happened. One at the Kent County Memorial Hospital that was traced to a shattered gas lantern. And then another one at Yale City Town Hall. Broadcast notes of that. So interesting places that fires supposedly happen.
One other thing to note too, that there's the typical call and response that's done quite a bit, where it's like, now I'm like forgetting how to do it. Yeah, like
yeah,
that
and like clicking.
Yes, there's like a knock, call and response. There's clicks, and first of all, if I'm in my scary house with a weird family, I'm not calling out for shit. I'm staying locked in my fucking room. They can take whatever they want. They can leave later. I'm not calling out for nothing. Not a thing.
Yeah. So when Eve wakes up, Charlie's gone. And so Eve goes downstairs, and the family has just made themselves at home. Paige and Jenny are at the table. Thomas is making eggs. And Thomas is like, oh yeah, Charlie just left for town and said something about the basement being all clear. Like, told me to tell you that. And I'm like, okay, like, what are they doing? And Eve's shocked that they're using the kitchen. And Thomas is like, oh yeah, Charlie's kind enough to let them use it since the nearest diner is far away. But aren't you leaving?
Like, aren't you
supposed to be heading out of
going?
town?
Did you believe that Charlie had told them that?
I thought Charlie.
Yeah, I thought something happened to Charlie.
Yeah.
Like, for sure.
And of
Who
course,
said it didn't?
right? You don't know. This Charlie. Of course, Eve doesn't have her phone. She lost it. And the kicker, the family doesn't have phones either. Because they're doing a digital detox from church. But this is the thing. They're moving, right? This family's moving. So is it like a nationwide church thing, or was it just their congregation? I'm like, what do you
Well, and he said they would like FedEx them back after the month detox. They're moving across the fucking country. And you're telling me that they're moving with 3 young kids across the fucking country and they don't have cell phones? Absolutely not. No.
I don't trust
Absolutely not. I trusted no one.
No.
Nothing.
And so Eve does have like an internal debate, like, oh, maybe Charlie is in the basement, or did she really actually leave? So she does at least have that thought, that sense. But she does, like, throughout the book, it's very common she grounds herself by pointing out features of the house and just kind of noticing different things, which I think gives her kind of where she talks about pointing out irrelevant details. I think by grounding herself and kind of focusing, she's able to pick those out too. And she notices Charlie's locket is hanging on one of the nails on the wall that Eve removed last night. Sketchy.
So sketchy. And Eve is like weighing her options. And basically she's like, I would rather be anywhere else but in this house with this family right now. So we gotta go. And so she leaves the family in the house because at that point, honestly, that's what I would do too. I would, if they're not leaving, I am. But it's important to note, like we said, this house is very remote and there was a snowstorm. And so it's very, like, the conditions are not great. But Eve hikes her ass, takes Shiloh, hikes her ass over to the neighbors to try and find a phone to get a hold of Charlie so she can corroborate the story that Thomas just gave her.
Yep. And so we talked about Mo the monkey earlier, but there is a document of a conversation on raretoyforums.net, and it's pretty funny. I can't read all of it, but it's about people trying to look for this toy and talk about the Mandela effect and how there's just different versions of this toy, that the toy that people are looking for haven't existed, the actual ones.
Yes.
And I just love, so if you are on Reddit, right, there's like Reddit bots, and I love the one that's like only says monkey, and it's like monkey. And so it's like, you know, the bots that just pop up for like different words. I thought that was funny.
Yep.
But yeah, so definitely interesting.
Yeah, and this is the first dive into the Mandela effect. And I feel like that, to me, at least in my theories that I've kind of started to piece together, the Mandela effect and how that's impacted by maybe different timelines, that's kind of where my head is with all of this. Along with it being paranormal, because there are some instances that would not happen in regular situations. So I think that maybe the paranormal realm has something to do with the way that the timelines overlap. But right now, as we're talking through this, I might come to a different conclusion by the time we're done. I'm in the camp of paranormal and different timelines.
I'm on definitely different timelines. What you kind of brought up earlier, the stray dog summit. Their realtor was telling them about that, and that there was a lot of strays up there. And he's like, well, stray dogs. Like, he clarifies it and calls it stray dog summit, but really it's like a misnomer. So which made me like not trust anything else throughout the entire book. But the stray dogs are actually down at the creek, but Stray Dog Creek doesn't have the same like flow of the tongue, is what the realtor says.
Eve gets to her neighbor's house. We meet Heather. Now, she was walking to her neighbor's house and she notices the address like right in the, like, nailed to a stump as she goes up, and it's 3707. And now she's like, wait a minute. Wasn't that supposed to be 3708? And this was the first glimpse into the different addresses that are used interchangeably for the same places, which makes me think that there are different timelines happening. She goes up to the house. There's a light on inside. The light goes off. She knocks on the door. No one's answering. Heather is outside. Heather approaches her and Shiloh outside, and there's no one in the house. And so Eve is like, that's a little weird. And Heather's like, yeah, it's on a timer. No, it's not. Heather, no, it fucking is not. No. But what was really interesting about this entire interaction before we get into the house and also the weird things that happen inside of Heather's house. Shiloh was okay with Heather.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Shiloh was comfortable with Heather, and Shiloh got Shiloh's name because Shiloh is shy. And so the immediate trusting of Heather kind of put Eve a little bit at ease, but also she's like, something is not right here.
Yeah. And Eve does bring up to Heather about like Stray Dog Summit, or that there's a lot of strays. Heather's like, I never heard of that.
Yeah.
Thought it was interesting. And then this document here, which I have not really connected to the cold hypothermia. Like, I haven't dug into that piece, but this is a document about a couple that was founded in Canada due to hypothermia and like some of the strange things that happened. So all I could think of is that somebody was cold.
It was, yeah, I have not figured out how that ties back in. Someone else who's smarter than me can figure it out.
So Eve ends up getting a hold of Charlie, but Charlie doesn't recognize her voice at first, which makes me think that it's a different Charlie.
Yes. I think we're just going to die because we're far enough in now.
Yeah.
So I think that the Charlie that answered the phone is the Charlie from who I think wrote the Reddit post at the end. Or it's the Charlie from when Eve turns into Emma and they broke up.
Yeah.
And so they had been apart for a while.
That's where I think it could have been her, because later on too, they do like kind of the muffled talking, I think the same as this one. So that's what makes me think that it could have been Charlotte, like Charlie Charlotte at that time. And then they get cut off, like they don't really finish the conversation. And so he was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And then Heather mentions that she used to babysit Thomas, and that all things considered, glad that he has a lovely family now. And we're like, what? Like, all things considered. So Eve does decide to stay with Heather and like have some tea, you know, because she's like, I need to figure out more about this. Like, she knows about Thomas. Like, we need to figure out more. And then we get an ad, one of the documents for Spirited Away, showing in Rochester, New York, which we find out later was actually Eve and Charlie's first date, was to see this movie. I saw this movie so long ago. I don't really remember it. I want to rewatch it because I'm like, what does it tie into? I need to rewatch it again.
I have never heard of it, so
we'll watch it together. It'll be our first date. And so Heather and Eve talk about the history of the house. She asks her, like, do you know how old it is, when it was built? And Eve was like, the records I heard were lost in a fire, which we saw the document for the fire earlier. And Heather's like, it wasn't a fire. They were stolen. That was a cover-up. I'm like, where are these documents then? Where are these documents?
What's really interesting is Eve mentions to Heather that she hopes that his sister ended up getting the help that she needed. Because like Thomas said, Allison lost her mind slowly, like started replacing their family members. Her entire perceptions, her reality was warped. And Heather is like, Thomas is an only child. What? So apparently, per Heather's recollection of babysitting Thomas and whatever reality Heather's fucking living in, Allison or Alina wandered onto the property and lived with the Faust family for 2 years. She was unwell. They basically like more or less fostered her, is the story that she has. However, in Heather's recollection of events, there was an incident where Allison stabbed Thomas 37 times with the fountain pen. 37 times.
Insane. So that is what Heather's referring to when she said all things considered.
And as Eve is getting ready, like they're having this conversation, the phone rings and Heather's like, that's probably for you. Like you might want to go get it. But all of a sudden Eve's like, something isn't right here. Something is not right here. Something is wrong. What we forgot to mention is that Mo was there.
Oh yeah.
Eve's childhood toy was there, identical to what Eve remembered hers to look like, in Heather's house. And Heather says, oh, I'm so sorry, my grandchildren were just here, blah, blah, blah. But the house, minus a couple of toys, is immaculate, fully spotless. So the phone's ringing now. She's seen Mo. Heather gave her this really weird recollection about Thomas and Allison, saying that Thomas was stabbed, a whole like diatribe about this. Eve looks at the phone but also realizes that, again, they're in the house alone. There's a door open now in the hallway with the phone that was not open before. So Eve runs off after this. She doesn't answer the phone. She takes Shiloh. She runs back to the house. Except before she gets back, first we get another document. And this is a police report of a man wandering the road by Kettle River in a t-shirt and jeans despite the super cold weather. Mentioned something about a psychiatric facility, 3 men in white suits, but all parties just disappear. And basically, due to the worsening weather, they just let the situation go.
Yeah. Weird.
So strange.
So as Eve is rushing back to her house, Shiloh's still close behind her. For here's the green again, too. Now I like pointing out.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, point it all out.
Or not, but so as she's going to, she sees a figure facing away, standing at arm's length from the tree line. And she can't figure out who it was. It was a child, an adult, and Eve could only discern navy green boots, blue jeans, and a white t-shirt. So I just thought it was interesting. Navy green boots.
Yeah.
And then she tries to call out to this figure, and it just remains still, and then it just dissolves into the woods.
Yes.
And then Shiloh runs into this cabin, and carved into the stoop of this cabin is the words old house. And this house is covered in papers. Covered in
now
maps, papers.
What we didn't know before, but we do know now, is that the Morse code does spell out something very interesting. Now, again, she walks up, it just says old house in the fucking creepiest font. There's some weird shit happening. Morse code says, the old man with the scar has lived in the cabin for centuries and goes by many different names, is what the Morse code in all of the documents adds up to. Which is quite interesting because now that she's at Old House with Shiloh, it's covered in papers. And Eve associates this with the story that Heather gave her that someone broke in and stole all of the records and documents. But then a creepy old man blocks her way out, and she notices things start changing almost in real time. And this creepy man says that she's not supposed to be there and that the people in her house are not what they look like. I'm sorry. And then again, just for emphasis, the Morse code read, the old man with the scar has lived in the cabin for centuries and goes by many different names.
Yes. And one of the notes she finds too before interacting with this man, I thought was interesting. It says, if he followed directions properly up until this point, Red Lake will be bone dry. At its deepest point, there will be a steel hatch in the ground that leads to a house of refuge. A middle-aged woman will be there to provide further instruction. If her son has passed away in the last year, leave immediately and backtrack your route to the last house of refuge. Ensure the woman does not follow. And there's just more different things. And then it's like the guide in Lansdale is a fucking fraud. Do not listen to a word he says. And so
time moves slower in the Brenda mines.
Yeah. So it's like all these different timelines, and makes me think too, and it's like, well, if her son has died in the past year, you're in the wrong timeline. And I have this book actually on my shelf. I haven't read it yet, but it's like, if this book exists, you're in the wrong timeline. And so I just think of that. I'm like, am I in the wrong timeline because this book exists? And so that just what makes me think of that from this too. It's just interesting.
Yeah, it's very curious. Now, this interaction is like, it's obviously terrifying, but the old man is really just trying to get Eve to get the fuck out. Like, he is terrifying just in like his presence and being, but like he really is just trying to get her away.
Yep. And he does tell her, like, you need to be careful, whatever means necessary, get them to leave. Like, get them out. Like, you need to leave, but you need to get them out too.
And I just keep coming back to like Mo's thought, like once they're in, they never leave. Now the old man, do we think that this is like Thomas in another form?
Kind of. I go back and forth on that one. Because he goes by many names, so it could be.
It could be. I also think that, so thinking about Stray Dog Summit, I'm just going to start like on a rambling situation here, and I'm probably not going to get to any particular point because, again, I still don't know what the fuck is happening. But I was thinking about it in the context of Stray Dog Summit, and The light specifically from the cabin is something that Eve recognizes and points out but doesn't know the source of several times in the book when she's outside. She notices a light ahead of her, like in the forest. This was something I even picked up like on the first listen. And it's definitely from this cabin. Like it has to be. Now, again, going back to Stray Dog Summit, there are some theories, especially on that Reddit forum that we were talking about it being like Stray Dog Summit is like the stray people. So there are stray timelines, open strings, open ends. And for me, the old man is almost like the epicenter of it. And because he's been there for centuries, he's been trying to gather as much information as possible, in my opinion, to try and save people, to at least get answers. Because, like, he's been there for a very long time. He is helping Eve. But I also think there's a chance that it could be Thomas. And it could just be this, like, every reality is slightly altered. Like, when she's in the cabin, she's almost on a different plane of reality. When she's at Heather's, she's almost in a different plane of reality. It's almost like this entire town where it is said that there's only one way in and one way out, like exists in its own like bubble of timelines. And I'm sure none of this makes sense because I'm just talking out loud trying to make sense of everything, but like it obviously has to connect in some way. But like there's so many possible routes that this could take. Like part of me thinks that like Thomas's family isn't even real. Like Thomas himself is real, but he's like an entity. This is kind of like one of the first running theories that I had before I got too deep into like the multiple timelines. And like he like brought forth a quote unquote family with him, but like he is the like sinister entity that's like running the house basically. Yeah, it's just there's so many. I feel like my brain is firing in 1,000 different directions, and that's fine. But like, I don't know. I really don't know.
Well, so the next document I find really interesting, and I think it does kind of go into like kind of what you're saying about Thomas being the entity, but it breaks down like old house, and like that's a term that gets used a lot. And there's like different people. Like we won't go too in depth of it because it's a lot. Like definitely read this book and get more. But there's like the host, the guest, the guide, a tourist, a trespasser, an anchor, the hatch, a shortcut, and a hook. And so one of the things a couple things from this document that I want to point out too is like one thing it says, the longer someone is trapped in old house, the more dangerous they become to themselves and others. Some claim that symptoms akin to radiation sickness and psychosis can occur, hallucinations, extreme paranoia, etc. But like you were saying, like Thomas being an entity, like he's almost like the anchor.
Yeah.
And he's been trapped there for so long. Like if he was a little kid there, and because they say if you've been in old house for longer than a year, then it's really hard to escape.
Yeah.
So like the host is a person that's trapped or willfully residing in old house for longer than 1 year. Actually, longer than 1 month, it's harder to escape.
Yeah.
So like entering, because where did I read? Like entering without a guide is not good. And so that's basically, I feel like, what happened to Eve and Charlie. They did not enter this house with a guide, and now they are guests.
Yes. And there's also too, this has me wondering because the cabin is labeled as old house. Do we think, like I said, I think it's like the area itself, like Stray Dog Summit is old house.
Yeah.
This cabin was labeled as old house, but I think that the entirety of where they are is that, like, to me, I feel like Heather's not even real.
Yeah.
Or she exists on like a different plane of reality. Yeah, so it's like a hatch, any structure or entrance that can be used to enter and exit old house. And like you said, maybe green doors, or like I said, the dumbwaiter, the basement. Like, I think that all of this is connected within this like giant property line. And like, I don't think it's relegated to just their house, if that makes sense.
Yeah. The ants do get brought up here too. A lot. We could go in depth, but we're just going to, we'll move on.
Yes.
And so we have this next chapter called Relic, and she finally makes it back to her house. We think is her house. The family's still there, and they want to leave. So Eve's like, all right, cool. I'm going to go look for the tire chains. Like, I'm going to go do that. and so that family can safely leave. She stumbles a box labeled Charlotte stuff, donate, which to Eve, her timeline, Charlotte is called Charlie. So she's like, why does it say Charlotte? And it's like her camera and all this stuff here.
Yeah.
And while she's looking around, she sees Thomas walk out towards the shed and then scream and hit his head with his palm. And like Eve observes this from inside the house and was like, what the heck is going on? Like, what is going on? And so when she's observing this too, on the windowsill, carved into it is, don't forget which house you're in. So that's where, like, I feel like too, like the different houses on the summit are like different like hatches or different, what is the other word that we use? Different like shortcuts, like to jump locations almost too.
Yes.
Just like different things, which I thought was crazy.
Yeah.
And then the lights go out and Eve's trapped in the attic. And I'm like, F this. Rereading it too, like listening to it freaked me out. And then reading it though freaked me out equally as much.
Yeah. And now the lights go out and obviously her flashlight like goes in and out because why wouldn't it? You know, why wouldn't that happen? But she notices, so this is something that Hannah pointed out, like insulation. And it's very akin to like a psychiatric facility or like a solitary confinement type of thing. That's where Eve ends up at some point in her timeline. Like in one of these timelines, one version of Eve ends up in a psychiatric facility. Also, Allison spent time in a psychiatric facility in some form on some of these timelines, wherever she existed.
Yep. Yes. And so there's like a creepy woman that's jaundiced in a hospital gown that like peers at Eve, and then the hatch opens from the attic and Eve is free. And I did lie. I said that there was 2 chapters in first person. I thought this chapter was, the next one was in first person, but it's not.
Okay.
But sorry.
Yeah, but I did think, how could you lie to us like that, Hannah? How could you?
I was the other Hannah.
Hannah too. I did think that the creepy woman in the jaundice hospital gown was the same person that was in the basement. Unless you're in the camp that thinks that the person in the basement was Charlie originally. I don't think so. But
no, I don't think so.
I think the woman in the attic was the woman in the basement.
Yeah, I think that's just somebody that's trapped in the house.
Yeah. Seems like a lot of people get trapped there.
Yes. Then the next chapter is super random. I don't know if you felt that way, but it's definitely it's in there. It's called Light. And it makes me think too that maybe because as she tumbled down the ladder from the attic, she like hit her head into the banister. So now like going back and like I wonder if it was like a shortcut, like she went to the different timeline. So, like this next chapter, she's thinking like you have to hide. But she wakes up in like this small room with beige walls and a window that overlooks a pond, and that she's been here for months, maybe years, and she doesn't really know. It just cuts off like she wonders.
Yeah.
And then she wakes up again and she's back in the house. So I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, something like got her back. Anyway.
Yeah.
Interesting little chapter there.
It was. And so Eve comes to, Thomas and Paige says she was screaming for help. She fell, passed out. She tells them that she saw an intruder upstairs and she thinks it could be Allison. And Thomas is like, it's not possible. Probably a squatter. The house was empty for a while. Something very interesting, I'm glad you put this in here too, is that Paige is now in a red rocking chair that Thomas brought in from the truck.
Yeah.
For her back problem, she says. But like, who is hauling in conditions that they said were too icy to even drive the truck up to the house, pulling out an entire rocking chair into a stranger's home that you should have been leaving hours ago. So
I thought this was interesting too. So Kai in this, we're going to call it timeline. This Kai, he's described as like disinterested by it all. Like he thought Eve was making up things for attention, which I just thought was interesting. Like I feel like it just kind of helps to, I think, place who Eve is in this timeline.
Yes.
Of like how the kids interact with her.
Yes. And Paige does lend out an apology for bringing up her lifestyle at dinner and saying that Thomas is the one who brought her to the Lord originally. However, Thomas does not have a strong faith from what we've seen.
Yeah.
He had his eyes open during Grace when they had family night originally. He told Eve he used to be deep in his faith and deep in the church, but he kind of lost it, and he really only does it for Paige. And so for Paige to be like, well, Thomas was the one who brought me to the Lord in the first place, I thought was a little odd.
Mhm.
And Eve just starts growing more and more suspicious of the family, as she fucking should.
Right?
I'm suspicious of the family. I'm suspicious of everyone and everything. And she believes that the family is trying to make her look unstable. And she keeps like thinking about how like Allison was losing her mind.
Mhm.
And she's like, uh-oh.
And so we talked about earlier that Eve lost her phone. So she like hears the chiming of like a phone going off. And so she rushes up and she accuses Kai of stealing her phone and like takes the phone out of his hand, and Shiloh starts attacking the kid. Poor puppy. We won't talk about that, but yeah. The puppy lives. Like Shiloh attacks the kid, and Kai gets aggressive against the dog, and like Kai freaks out and is like, that psycho and her dog attacked me. And it turns out that like it wasn't even her phone, but she's like, I swear it was. And I feel like it's also like that like perception timeline shift too, which is interesting. And then this part that changed, I'm like, what?
This, in the room upstairs where she had confronted Kai, there was a stained glass window. And now there is no fucking stained glass window. It's just gone. It is replaced by a regular window. It is gone. And she's like, the fuck? Literally, what the fuck?
Yeah. She's like, okay, the phone thing, whatever. Maybe I was losing it. But this window, like, I know for sure that there was a window with a tree.
Yep.
And now it's...
Yeah, it was an apple tree, very specific. And even Thomas, like, he remembered the stained glass window from when he supposedly lived there. So then we have another document, and this one was called Recovery, and it's about lost hikers. And this one, again, we didn't see like a super close connection to, but worth looking into, or again, worth having someone smarter than us put the pieces together on our behalf. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, so sorry, real quick.
Oh, don't go ahead.
Like re-looking at this document too, because it says like this one, her and her companions, the people that got lost in the hikers, that they were in a blizzard and they came across a 1950s style hotel. And they were sheltered there for weeks, and they were picked off by an unseen force, dragged through what she calls doorways to different places. So I feel like this document was picked out because it was like, is it interesting?
Yeah. And was it the Kettle Creek Motel?
Right.
You never know. But finally, the family is leaving. Finally. Eve walks out of the house and sees Charlie's truck idling next to the family. And at first she's relieved, but then she's immediately worried that Thomas is telling Charlie a very skewed perception of the events that have taken place and are continuing to make Eve look unstable and unhinged. And so I think it's important to remember what we talked about earlier, where I think that the story about her uncle was placed in there for us specifically to know that Charlie is a skeptic, and she's very rarely going to have those moments of like, yeah, something weird's going on here.
Yeah.
Something is always explainable. It's kind of like, have you seen Get Out? Because I know they reference Get Out in like the cover on here. So if you haven't seen Get Out, I'm so sorry, but it's, first of all, phenomenal horror movie, one of the best I've ever seen. It's like that moment where you see Charlie out there, but then you see her talking to the family that you were excited and then horrified. It's like in Get Out, where the police car pulls up at the end and you're immediately horrified, but then you see his friend is the one who gets out and you're like, oh, thank God, because like obviously they're going to think that the black guy ruined the rich white person's house.
Yeah.
Like, the social commentary of it all. But that was the exact same feeling that I got when I saw that Charlie was outside talking to the family. I was so excited that Charlie was there, and then immediately was like, fuck, what are they telling her?
Yep. 100%. It also gave me Us vibes. Us still freaks me out.
Us is
I
horrifying.
think too much of it. But it's just like the ultimate people, like, yeah.
Yeah, like Jordan Peele, any of his films, just watch them.
Yes. So then Charlie Eve, and then Eve's like, we gotta get out of here. Charlie's like, well, let me go get my stuff, blah, blah, blah. She runs to get her stuff, and Charlie's like, oh yeah, I did notice the window was different. Maybe, and they joke like, maybe that was their plan all along. They wanted to switch out the windows. Anyway.
Okay. But I don't believe that the Charlie that went inside is the Charlie that came back out.
Yeah, I could see that.
I think that the original Charlie was sitting outside in the truck, and then she went inside with Shiloh, and original Charlie never left that house. I think a different Charlie from a different timeline came back out. And the anticipation of her coming back outside and Eve's anxiety was so stressful. Because she's watching her like walk through the house and like turn on the lights and watching her silhouette move through, and she's just waiting for something to happen. She's waiting for like a menacing figure to pop up in the window, and it doesn't. Charlie comes out unscathed. But given the events that we're about to talk about, I just don't believe that the Charlie that went in is the Charlie that came out.
I'm looking back at like the old house doc, and I'm like, could she be, could she be a guide, or could she be a tourist or a trespasser?
Well, and Eve spends more time at the house than Charlie does.
Yeah. Guys, just read it.
Yeah.
And girls, ladies, everybody, people. So the interrogation, like, we don't have to go too in depth of it because it's a lot, but it just is interesting. I was rereading it, and I don't know about these guys. I don't know. What was your thoughts on the interrogation?
So I thought, so it says like they tried going upstairs, they had an argument, there was a bunch of like stuff that happens that feels kind of akin to what Eve has been dealing with in some ways. In others, it feels a little crazy. But Andrew, like, I think that he had the beginnings of what was described for Allison and what Eve thinks she was going through, where her perceptions and the reality around her were changing as time was going on. And I think that this was just kind of like another one of those scenarios where like it's just showing like the layers and how many people, how big of an area this can affect. I don't necessarily think that these people are tied directly to them, but was more so put in as like a, dude, this was insane. And that something very similar also happened to them.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting just how, like you said, it was just his reality is just being altered, and he doesn't feel like himself, and he doesn't want to seem crazy because he's like, I feel like this is real. So I thought that was interesting. And then this part, this is where, I mean, I guess I feel like I said this like 3 times already so far.
It's fine.
But this is really where I was hooked in this next chapter. Maybe it's called Getaway, and I just thought of Getaway Car and just,
I know this, like, I was in the thick of this book too, but this is the scene where I like, as I was listening, I like put both hands down and I went, no fucking way.
Yeah. So Charlie and Eve arrive at the Kettle Creek Motel, and it's like missing some letters, so we assume that it's Kettle Creek Motel. And the front desk lady is like just disinterested. Let me finish after this chapter. Like, she's just not there. But like, all right, 1 bed, 1 room, 1 night.
Yes.
This hotel is interesting, and it takes them like so many tries to like get into the room. Like, Charlie's key doesn't work at first, and she tries Eve's, and then she's like, 10th time's a charm or whatever. And then they get in there, and Eve, she's like, oh, I found your locket hanging above the fireplace. Like, that's weird. And Charlie's like, oh, one of the kids must have done it. And then Eve does ask Charlie, like, do you think I'm crazy? And Charlie's like, who isn't? And then Charlie's like, wait, is this about the window? Like, I saw it too. Maybe we're both losing it. And Eve's like, just kind of shakes her head, and Charlie's like, no, the attic person. Charlie kind of reassures her, like, we'll look at it tomorrow. Hey, we can call the authorities to come out if that's it. And no, Charlie just still continues, is like, it's a rough day. Anyone would have lost their mind being trapped with that family. And just kind of reassures her, you're not alone. I'm here always. And then Eve says that she is starting to feel like Allison. Because of the window, because of everything, she said she just like doesn't know what's happening between like the phone incident, all of this stuff. And she's like, I would bet my life that was my phone that Kai had. And Charlie was like, you're just stressed. To Eve's like, and I thought this like motel was abandoned when we drove by it the first time. All these different things. And
then if you guys remember, there's only 1 way in and 1 way out of this town, and you have to pass by this motel.
Yep. So now it's not abandoned. Charlie's like, trust me, if you were losing it, I'd be the first person to point it out. And he was like, that's true. And it comforted Eve just a little bit. But she turned to face Charlie, and a voice in Eve's head whispered, "She isn't her." And it wasn't Mo, it was the voice of something different, something far worse. And like, it told her again, like, "This isn't your Charlie." And Eve is like, huh? She remembers Thomas saying something that Allison used to test them and ask questions about the past and just to see if they were like actually her family or not. So she does test this Charlie and is like, "How did we meet?" Charlie's like, "What? Are you testing me?" And Eve's like, "Just please, like, I know it's stupid, just humor me. Please, the whole story from the top." So Charlie passes. She tells the story of when they first met. They went to see Spirit Away.
They fall asleep. However, this part shook me to my core. Eve wakes up at 3 o'clock in the morning because there's a buzzing sound. And so she pulls out the phone, and who's calling?
Eve Palmer.
Eve Palmer is calling Eve, which means that someone has her phone.
Yep.
The one that was lost that she couldn't find. However, when she answers the phone, the person on the other line is Charlie. Charlie is currently asleep in the motel bed with her, like in the room. And Eve is like, what the fuck? On the phone, this Charlie is saying, "She's not me. I never left the house. Something is wrong. You need to leave, escape, never come back here, never come to this house. Shiloh's not the right dog. Something is wrong." Then she hears something happen on Charlie's end. She hears footsteps. She hears some staggers. She hears sounds that she can't decipher whether it's really a cry or maybe like a laugh. Everything just gets closer and closer until the line cuts off. And then Charlie, who was supposedly just on the phone with Eve, is now in the doorway asking her what she's doing on the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning. And Eve, in her state of confusion, is trying to get a hold of a contractor at 3 o'clock in the morning. Then she notices that this Charlie, the Charlie that she is with that's in front of her right now, because Charlie turns on the light, that Charlie's left hand, the black triangle that she has on her left index finger, is gone. This Charlie does not line up with the visual representation of her Charlie that she has in her head.
Yeah.
And she didn't notice it until now. And again, it's on her left index finger. So if Charlie's driving, Eve can't see that side of her hand.
No.
The motel, you're not really noticing things. She's in a very like dazed and confused sort of thing.
Yeah.
So she didn't notice it until that moment. And so Eve gets the fuck out of there. She gets into the truck. Of course, the truck has low fuel as soon as she starts driving. But she's not driving away. She's driving back toward the house.
So she's going to try to find her Charlie.
Yes.
Of course, no shoes. She just hops in the car. So the next document we get is it's called Inkwads. And it talks about a psychological phenomenon in which the human mind perceives familiar patterns and shapes within chaotic or ambiguous stimuli. It's called pareidolia. I don't know if I said that right. But it's just like seeing animals in clouds, faces on surfaces, or perceiving music or voices in white noise. It's linked to subject's level of anxiety. Just a little interesting note. And then we have the chase. Eve stops to get gas, and she just looks so disheveled. Like I said, she's not wearing shoes. Her hair's a mess. She's woken up in the middle of the night. She sees a sign on the gas station, and it says, or the gas pump, and it says cash only, pay inside. So she rummages through the truck, finds like $9 in coins and ripped up bills. And she goes inside, and the clerk asks her, but what she hears at first is, "Do you want religion?" But what he really said is, "Do you want regular?" And she's like, "What?" Then there's a quarter that falls, and it rolls, and there's a cop. Of course, there's a cop at the gas station.
Of course.
And the cop's like, "Oh, you didn't wear shoes."
Yeah.
So whatever, she gets gas. She heads out. Then she's like paranoid because she's like, "Oh my gosh, is this cop going to pull me over?" Like, obviously I look like I'm a mess. And he does. And then he questions her about, "When did you last sleep? And are you under the influence of anything?" And then he lets her go, but gets a call on the radio to be on the lookout for someone on the run. She's like, "Oh, is that about me? Did like Charlie call me in? Blah, blah, blah." And she just starts the truck and speeds off, and the cop doesn't follow her.
So Eve does end up making it back to the house. And despite everything... Oh, go ahead.
She almost runs over a child on her way back.
Oh my God, I scrolled too far down.
She slams on the brakes, almost hits this child, and the child's wearing jeans, a white t-shirt, and green boots. See the green
Which
again.
is jeans, a white t-shirt was the outfit that guy was wearing, who was meandering in the woods when it was too cold with those 3 people in white were with him.
And wearing navy green boots again. So it's the same thing. Remember she saw that figure too earlier? This makes me think of these are all the strays. These people, these random figures. But the child, super creepy, does odd movement, she's on a crucifix, and then it just scurries off in the woods, and Eve's not my problem. And then gets back to the house.
Yeah, despite every ounce of her telling her to not go in, she steps inside. And then before we find out what happens inside, we do get one more document. And this document is talking about a Norwegian psychologist who was world renowned. He's esteemed, and he was fired for quote unquote absurd claims because he was basically saying that he became convinced that one of his patients was actually suffering from afflictions in this phenomena that everyone thought was a mental health disorder, but he was actually experiencing these things, and that he had concrete proof that would even turn skeptics and make them believe in the information that they had. It just ends by saying that they're not sure if he's going to retain his title, but the doctor stood by the fact that he believes that his patient was actually being impacted by legitimately unexplained phenomena.
Interesting. So when she gets to the house, there's seemingly no power. She walks in, see the table is set for 6, and there's a figure sitting there, kind of hunched over, and sits up and then darts away. Oh, suspicious.
I think that was Jenny in my brain.
Could have been. Then imposter Charlie, so the Charlie from the motel, calls and tries to talk to Eve while she hears real Charlie's voice asking Eve for help. And then the creepy attic lady is there telling Eve to hide. There's just so much going on right now. It's so much going on. And you also hear somebody counting down from 15 up above. And so then Eve rushes out, finds herself in a room that's unfamiliar in the house. And she's like, maybe this is the nook that Jenny was hiding in. And this is where she finds the green door cracked open with a cryptic circle glyph on it.
She's wandering deeper, and there are paintings and photos of this house in very different stages. So there's one of a family. So she recognizes Thomas in someone to look like his sister, his parents. However, Thomas looks like he was added in after, digitally imposed, photoshopped, popped in at a later date. Something is not right about Thomas being in the image. As she was looking through the rest of the pictures, none of them had Thomas in them, except for the ones that were imposed with Thomas. There's a picture of Allison's dad, and he's wearing a shirt with a ring of eyes, which was the symbol that was carved into the places. And so she's like, what the fuck? So what's going on with Thomas? And then she finds a note. And this note was written by Allison. And I'm going to read the letter. We're going to cut out a few parts, but just so you get the gist of it. But it says, quote, "You are not who they say you are. Thomas, quote unquote, Faust, is not your brother. He has been living, scratched out, trapped here since long before the house was built, before the trees were planted. He changed your memories, warped your family, forced himself into your life. Despite what everyone around you says, your name is not Alina. It is Allison. Allison Faust. Your father is Elijah, and your mother is Vera. The religious zealots who replace them are not real. They are mimics. Thomas, or whatever force controls him, wants to drive you mad, wants you to stay locked up here forever. He's making you see things, making you doubt your own sanity. What are his motives? The more you fight the charade, the worse, underlined, it gets. There's only one way to stop it. You have to play along. Make him show his true face. Then you strike."
Yep. So she tucks that little letter into her pocket alongside Charlie's necklace. This is when she notices ants. She follows the ants that lead to her to another Charlie. I think it's her Charlie.
I think that this is the Charlie that went into the house and never came back out.
Like, the ants start to, like, encase Charlie. And Charlie tells Eve she's not supposed to be here yet and that she needs to hide.
Yes.
Which is also suspicious.
But it reminds me, now that we talked about it, of in the old house where it says, if the woman's son has died, go back. So I'm wondering if she's saying, you're not supposed to be at this timeline yet. Like, you're not supposed to be here yet. Something is, like, I feel like maybe it ties back to, like, the timing of things and how things are lining up.
Yeah. Who knows?
Especially because the yet. Like,
yeah.
It's not, you're not supposed to be here. It's not, you're not supposed to be here yet.
Yeah. And then the green again, I want to know, I got to go on Reddit. I might post to Reddit about it and see if anybody has already.
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Then a woman appears after Charlie is being, like, eaten alive by ants, right? Like, kind of gruesome. A woman appears with vivid green irises. You know who else has green eyes? Me. But also Jenny.
Jenny's weird as fuck to me. I don't know if Jenny's real. I don't know if she's, like, one of those weird entities. I don't know if she's, like, another anchor, like, presenting as a young girl.
Yeah.
Like, something about Jenny makes me very unsettled. And I say that as the entire book makes me unsettled.
She hides in, like, this wardrobe. Then all of a sudden she gets, like, a supercut of Allison's memories. Like, they just all come flooding back to her. It's like, she describes as, like, an entire lifetime condensed into rapid-fire slideshow. So vivid, so intense. Eve could almost hear it, see it, as if the memories are playing out right there in the shadows of the wardrobe. Some of these memories are like young Allison as an only child, a strange boy wandering out of the woods, which would be young Thomas. And that's when Allison's world began to transform.
Her parents, too, were, like, very hippie-ish in these memories, if I'm remembering correctly. Not religious at all.
Yep. She also has the memory of, like, Allison stabbing Thomas.
Oh, I just made a connection. Because she was gonna... So she grabs the hammer, heads out, and now she's noticing that everything looks different. And she says that it's decorated like a 1950s dream house. And if we go back to the document recovery, the lost hikers that were stuck in the motel said they came upon a, quote, 1950s style hotel. So,
yeah,
somewhere in this stray dog summit, somewhere in this realm, the 1950s has to have some sort of, like, parallel in some sort of timeline situation. Because as soon as I read that, I was like, I'm pretty sure Hannah just said that out loud like 10 minutes ago.
I did.
So yeah, I literally just made that connection.
No, I did too. And I didn't even think about it when I said it at first. Because I remember reading in here, like, the 1950s dream home.
Yeah.
So as she walks out, she's, like, creeping along. And then Thomas stops her, grabs her, and she describes it as, like, a vice-like grip and takes the hammer away and is like, what are you doing with this? And Eve is confused AF. And so am I. Because, like, what is going on?
Same.
And Thomas calls her Emma and says, like, this is your last chance in living with us. And that he doesn't want to put his family's sake. And he, like, stops himself. Which basically means I'm going to say safety, but then he corrects himself to stability at risk. He's just like, what the heck? But then she remembers Allison's note saying the more you fight, the deeper it gets. So then she just kind of starts to play along. Just some weird stuff. And they are at the table. Like, she's like, all right, I'm going to play along. I guess I'm going to have dinner with this weird version of this family that this is now their house. And they're calling me Emma. Eve notices that, like, Thomas doesn't have scars. He doesn't have scars from where, like, the pen, like, Allison stepped in.
Yeah, and then we get another document, which is the obituary of Elijah Faust, which, interestingly enough, he passed away at 67 in hospice care in Yale, which is, like, the overarching, like, area that they're from. And it says that he's survived by his daughter Allison, which is consistent with the letter that Allison wrote.
Yeah.
Not consistent with the story of Heather and Thomas in their original retellings that Eve got.
Yeah, interesting. So at the table, Thomas and Paige make Eve / Aunt Emma here we go with the double names now, explained to the kids that she was just looking for tools down in the basement so she could hang a photo. She just kind of plays along with that story. And Jenny's like, why don't you have a tattoo? And this makes me think, now that like we're going back, that like Jenny definitely is like a different Jenny too. Like she's
When she went to the
that's
basement. Yeah.
he switched. And she's like, Auntie Emma, why don't you have a tattoo? And Paige is like, Emma never had a tattoo. And I'm like, one of the timelines, she must have had a tattoo.
Yes.
You
and
know?
I'm pretty sure, I think it was the original timeline when the family arrived at the house, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. No, that's what I would think too.
Yeah.
I think right now, and I would have to go back, but I agree with you there.
Yes. Yeah, but no, I think you're right, though. I think this Jenny is the Jenny that went to the basement originally. And when she came back up, the Jennys were switched.
Kai's like an interesting person to me too. I don't know why. I just kept pointing at different things. And Kai like tells Jenny, like, you're going crazy. They're going to have to throw you in the loony bin. Just like when Paige cuts him off because we assume he's going to say like Emma, like that Emma's crazy. Eve notices the locket around Paige's neck. And Eve was like, that's Charlie's locket. That's Charlie's locket. And Paige's like, no, I just got it in an antique store. And opens it up. It's empty. And she's like, I don't know what to put in it. And he was like, no fucking way, that's Charlie's.
Because it was literally in her pocket with Allison's note. And then she came downstairs to this 1950s decoration, and now suddenly it's on Paige's neck.
Yeah. And so Eve loses it. She's like, F this, I'm not playing along anymore. And threatens Paige with the corkscrew. Thomas picks up the phone, and Eve's like, has like flashes of being like in the psych ward and is like, no, put it down. I'm not going there, right? And the kids exit, right? And Paige, self-defense, stabs Eve in the thigh, and then all of a sudden the corkscrews in Paige's neck.
Yep.
From Eve. So, right, Paige. And one of the weird things is that Thomas does call 911 and says their address of 3710, not 3709, which is where the first house was.
So like we said, when she went to Heather's and saw 3707 and she thought it was 3708, it's like everything is off by one in this particular time.
And so Eve runs upstairs to try to escape, you know, Paige dying and Thomas wailing, and Eve's trying to figure out it all, and runs up to Allison's room, and Allison is there holding a green pen. See, like, I don't know, maybe it's not.
There has to be,
but I feel like there's something.
No, that's too many coincidences and specificities of green, like the dark, like navy green boots, the green pen, the green door, like, and I'm sure, and the green eyes, like Allison's green eyes, Jenny's green eyes, like there has to be something with that.
Yeah.
Again, someone smarter will figure it out. Maybe we'll turn to Reddit, but like, it's an observation.
And so then Thomas is there, and she's like, they're fighting, you know, blah, 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 blah. And then Eve's like, I'm not a killer, even though she just killed Paige. And so she decides to not kill Thomas. As she's leaving, Thomas does call her Eve. And she's like, what the fuck? And then shit happens. They're up in the attic, and Thomas grabs her by the ankles, and then she traps him with the tire chains. And it's like this big, like, I don't know, this epic battle almost between these two. And then a cop interrupts them. Like, we gotta go. Just a few things that Eve/Emma notices on her way out. And then they kind of just walk right by Jenny and her green eyes. Green again. And the Jenny, like, they just kind of pass her. And she also notices Allison's out in the woods, and now she looks more like she's full of life versus she was before. I feel like this is like the main story-ish. Like, ends with an excerpt from an unaired episode of America's Bloodiest Crimes. And it talks about the Faust family massacre. And it's Eve/Emma's interrogation of right after, like, the event. And, you know, this is like Eve from the original timeline is now as Emma remembering different things. So, like, this interrogation is just like crazy. After this, we find out that Eve/Emma is locked away in a criminal psych ward called Greenwood Green Asylum because the judge let her off with insanity.
Yeah.
And she's like denying that she's Emma.
Yeah, she says people keep calling her Emma Faust, but she's not. Her name is Eve Palmer, and she's reciting it out loud. Like, again, old wounds. So this chapter, this is in first person. This is one of those first person chapters. And it just says, my current residence is 3709 Heritage Lane. My partner, the love of my life, is Charlie Bastian. We've been together for the better part of the last decade. And she just goes into that. Now, Hannah made the parallel earlier. So in the chapter Light, that very short chapter that we had, it says, she wakes in a room no bigger than a walk-in closet, beige walls, rickety bed, a window that overlooks a murky pond. That was a direct quote. And now, at the end here, where we're in this first-person chapter, it says, cooped up in a room no bigger than a walk-in closet, beige walls, cold light, rickety bed, my only solace is a barred window overlooking a pond of turtles. So it makes me wonder, though, was that Light chapter from Eve/Emma, like just like a little snippet where she's already here in another timeline, or was this a snippet from Allison? Because Allison was locked up at some point, and the chances that Allison experienced the exact same thing pretty damn high in my brain.
Yeah.
She starts like collecting evidence to prove the skeptics wrong. Well, not to prove the skeptics wrong, but to prove to herself, like, this is it. She calls this timeline's Charlie, who is known as Charlotte, and Charlotte tells her that they broke up because Eve just started packing up one day and never said anything. And so her entire memory of this relationship is just skewed for this current timeline. And this is where shit continues to get fucking weird. So Thomas visits her, and she notices that his teeth are different, maybe implants. He tells her that he found the Lord again. Thank God, right? Woohoo. Said that he forgives her. He forgave her for what she did to Paige. But then he leaves her with something that said it meant a lot to her and Charlie. Not Charlotte, Charlie. And he gives her the original locket, and on the inside is the only known photo of Eve Palmer. Like, looking back to that chapter that, was the lost pre-production unaired episode, it's almost like this reads like a found footage, like a Blair Witch type of found footage situation. Yeah. But also, like, I just think everything is layered on top of each other, one after the other. There are different timelines, and this is the last piece of it here. And I feel like we should just read this last chunk here, and then we can, wrap up.
Yeah.
So the last document of the book, it says Help is the title. Description: transcript of post on highstrangenessforums.net. The post title: my partner went missing, but everyone is telling me she never existed to begin with.
I never thought I'd be posting on a site like this, but right now, I don't know where else to turn. I've exhausted all other avenues: family, police, the fucking FBI, everything. On date redacted, I returned home to address redacted and found our recently purchased property looking as though it had been abandoned for decades, boarded up, completely falling apart. My partner, name redacted, was gone. Only our dog remained, wandering around the nearby woods. All other evidence of my life with name redacted, including photos, text messages, emails, all of it vanished overnight. The authorities, my friends, and family, everyone in my life insists that name redacted isn't a real person. I've nearly been institutionalized multiple times, but I'm not giving up. If anyone has any idea, any information, no matter how outlandish, please help. For more details, contact me here. Email redacted.
And that is We Used to Live Here.
Yep.
So you can see the ending is a little controversial. However, I firmly believe that is Charlie. I believe that is the Charlie that we got in the books is different than this Charlie that's writing it. This Charlie never existed in the premise of the story. I think that this Charlie
was the one that wasn't there.
Yes. So this is the one. I got this off of the Reddit forum, the Sorting Out We Used to Live Here on r/horrorlit. And it was a comment from Jess00921. And when I read this, I was like, this is it. Like, this happens. So she said, there are a lot of strays. I think that this is what they keep referring to. Not stray dogs, but stray timelines / people that coexist. I think the original Eve went into another timeline the first time that the family entered the house. when they came into the foyer and Eve went to call Charlie. That's why she couldn't reach her. She was already in another timeline. When Charlie showed up in the original timeline, the house was boarded up, all traces of Eve had vanished, and Shiloh was wandering the yard. We lost the original timeline in the first few pages of the book, was their theory. And so I personally agree with that, because didn't Charlie say that she never got the phone call from Eve? So I think that the post at the very end was from Charlie, the original Charlie that we never actually interacted with in the book.
It's just what's crazy to me. I agree with you there. But like when Charlie called Eve when she was with the other Charlie, like somehow I think the Charlie at the end of the books figured it out.
Yes.
And that's why she's like, you're not supposed to be here yet. Like, I'm supposed to figure this out. Like, I don't know, something.
Oh, so you think the one in the house with the ants is the original Charlie from the original timeline?
I think it could be.
I could see that.
I don't know. I have like 500 different thoughts.
Yeah. I know she interacted with Charlie, the other Charlie on the phone, or who we thought was original Charlie. And then we have doppelganger Charlie. This is too much to keep track of. But I feel like that phone call could have been faked by Thomas.
To get her back?
Someone. Because it's possible that the Charlie that was with her was just the Charlie of that timeline.
Yeah.
And while Charlie was a skeptic, her writing off Eve in those moments of like, I saw someone in our basement and she's like, bro, it's 3 a.m. Just go back to bed. I'll check in the morning. I feel like if that was the actual original Charlie that Eve remembers in her memory, she would not have written off her concerns, especially with strangers in the house.
True.
That like frivolously. Yeah. So I think that lends itself to believe that we never actually met that original Charlie, at least in that first half of the book.
I could see that.
What do you think? What do you think about the address changes?
I feel like the house is, like you said, like it's a like property. So I feel like in different timelines, the house was built in different like spaces. So it's like the different lots. I feel like it's also how like the old man in the cabin probably keeps track of things too.
Now that we've talked about everything, I don't believe that the old man in the cabin is actually Thomas, but I did while I was reading it.
Yeah.
And it did cross my mind as we were talking, but I don't think so as we got to the end here. But I do believe, now that we've reviewed everything, I do believe Thomas is an anchor.
I do too.
And Thomas is the one... Thomas, I feel like, can almost transcend timelines. Like, he's almost in control of everything.
Yeah, because I think he's like the entity.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that a lot of these things are meant to be thrown away as like Mandela effects and stuff like that. But the idea that these timelines are parallel and existing at the same time, especially with the Jenny situation, I don't know. I just feel like there has to be something with that. And also the stained glass window. I need to know what the fuck happened with the stained glass window. But if we're going on the idea that Charlie pulled up, the house was boarded up, and Eve was already in another timeline, when Eve stepped into that house, it changed. It was gone. So maybe because she changed timelines, like...
I just ordered it on Kindle because I had credits. So I can search things now.
Beautiful.
I have it in all different forms.
All formats available to Hannah.
I want to search. There was 53 mentions of the word green.
Interesting.
So Jenny, sorry guys, we're going on a green tangent real quick.
No, let's do it.
So Jenny's pen, her flashlight pen, is bright green. The card that Thomas hands to Eve is green font. And Jenny has green eyes. And they like mention that multiple times, like Jenny's green pen, Jenny's big green eyes. And there's a green walled guest room. There's a gnarled apple tree.
Oh, that's interesting.
With dark green leaves.
Yeah, that's the stained glass window.
Yeah. And then we talk about the green pen again. Talk about a green door. And in one of like the posts, it's like evergreen. That person's saying, personally, I think it's some glitch in the matrix. And something could be explained by bad memory. Ooh, so... when Charlie leaves the house after getting all her stuff, she has a navy green backpack. So when Charlie exits the house, it's said that it's a navy green backpack. But then later it says that it was coming from Charlie's green backpack.
So navy green is an interesting way to describe things.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe it's nothing, but I just think it's still weird. Anyway, okay. Well,
That was, I mean, we could literally for hours, we could probably talk about this.
yes.
What did you guys think? What did everyone think of this book? Because I have so many theories, and the more. So at first I was like, okay, that was cool. I'm down with like a little question at the end. And the longer I sit away with it, the more I find myself like wanting to obsess over it in a way that's probably unhealthy.
Yeah. Well, because too, so we talk about like fantasy books having maps. It
Mm-hmm.
does have a map of the old house, and it's
Yeah.
that old house map. And it
Mm-hmm.
has like certain things like around, and you can see there's like Charles Street, Berkeley, Bolton Avenue. And it's like the closet, the study, like the closet circle. And then like one of the rooms has like the circle with all the arrows, which I assume is like the basement. And it's like
Yep.
open and shut this closet door 3 times. Wait for 5 minutes. The door will open to a staircase.
Yeah, and it says like in Baker City during the months of February to July, your name is Kilroy Maxwell Wright. Act accordingly.
Yeah.
There's just, I genuinely feel like this is something you could like piece together, pick apart, have 5 people look at, and everyone comes to different conclusions on things.
Yep.
And honestly, like, I love that. I feel like this was such a unique, refreshed reading experience for a horror novel. And like I said, twice listening to it plus reading through the book, I feel like has only like strengthened the experience of it.
Yeah.
And like pointed out more details. And yeah, so that's that. That was a lot. Thank you all for joining us on this very chaotic journey of the plot and throwing out multiple theories at once that probably make 0 sense, but you know, that's what we're here for.
Yep.
It's to bring no sense to your lives.
Let's talk about our song choices though.
Let's talk about our song choices. So, I chose Trouble by Cage the Elephant. The first chunk of the song is just a bunch of oohs. We love a good ooh. But it starts by saying, at the table by the window with the view, casting shadows, the sun was pushing through, spoke a lot of words, I don't know if I spoke the truth. And I think that just is the overarching theme of We Used to Live Here. We don't know what's right. We don't know what's wrong. I don't know if I spoke the truth, but this is my perception. And it says, got so much to lose, got so much to prove. God, don't let me lose my mind. And obviously, it seems like everyone loses their mind a little bit in this. And the chorus is, trouble on my left, trouble on my right. I've been facing trouble almost all my life, which I think relates heavily to Eve because we didn't get into her backstory too much, but she is a very anxious person. She's dealt with quite a few mental health issues, and Charlie was always that source of grounding for her through the relationship. And so the next line is, my sweet love, won't you pull me through? Everywhere I look, I catch a glimpse of you, which I thought was interesting given the fact that I believe that there are multiple Charlies. Thought that was like a fun little parallel. It says, it said it was love and I did it for life, didn't do it for you. It goes into more ooze, and it says, we will come to pass, will I pass the test? You know what they say, the wicked get no rest. You can have my heart any place, anytime. It's like the essence of the song is like so unsettling. Like, am I going to pass the test? Am I going to get this right? I also love that they referenced Ain't No Rest for the Wicked in this song. And if you don't know Cage the Elephant, you definitely know that song. Like, that is probably the one song that everyone knows by Cage the Elephant. And it goes back into the got so much to lose, got so much to prove. My sweet love, won't you pull me through? And the quintessential line for me is really the got so much to lose, got so much to prove. God, don't let me lose my mind. And this is, I feel like, again, here we go, talking cinematically. Obviously, I picked this from a Strangers playlist, but specifically, I feel like this would be played at the end of this movie, which, by the way, it is being turned into a movie, I believe. Netflix or a show, one of the two.
Hopefully it's
It definitely got picked up for something. I watched an interview with Marcus Kliewer earlier today, and he said that he couldn't say much on it, but there would be news to come. But I imagine this, like the final scene, we get real original Timeline Charlie or whoever it actually is typing out the Reddit post or whatever forum post it is. And then it like slowly backs away with this song playing in the background because it's like a mildly unsettling song, but not actually creepy. And you're just sitting there like this, like, what the fuck just happened? So that's why I picked Trouble by Cage the Elephant. I feel like it has the perfect vibes for this book.
Yeah, no, I can see it.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. So I picked Stuck in the Middle with You for the
Mhm.
vibes as well, but like earlier in the, like, that you don't really know why the song is in there. You
Yeah.
know, like it's like
Mhm.
Stuck in the Middle with You, like it's kind of just like a vibey song and you don't know why.
Yeah.
They're,
I feel like it
like
would be
it's
played like
relevant.
if they're like hanging stuff up or like doing stuff in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
But it starts out like, well, I don't know why I came here tonight. I've got the feeling that something ain't right. Okay. It's like, and I'm wondering how I'll get down the stairs. I mean, song is not about what it's about, what I'm saying it's
Yeah.
about, but
Yeah.
but it's like, you know, I'm stuck in the middle with you, and it just makes me think of like all these timelines, like, you know, not necessarily like a happy thing to be stuck in the middle, but it's just like we're stuck in the middle with like Thomas.
Yeah.
And we're just stuck there. Later, it's like trying to make some sense of it all, but I can see that it makes no sense at all. Again, just like, well, I don't know why I came here tonight. I got the feeling that something ain't right. And like the song itself, it like, I tell you guys, I went through a lot, but I don't know, this song, like listening to it, I could just hear it as like the background soundtrack to this book. And like my other songs were more like, oh, this lyric, like Question by Taylor Swift would not be anything about this book, but it's just like, can I ask you a question? And it's just like going off of that and just different things.
Yeah.
But this one is just, it's mostly for the vibes and just like certain lyrics out of there that I'm like, yep, I could see it just being in there. And it's just like this stuck in the middle, like stuck in here.
Yes. But I love it. Yeah. I feel like both of them provide a very similar effect.
Yeah.
Especially because they both feel like a little upbeat, but they're also both a little unsettling. Yeah. So now we're going to move into our final book ratings. And if you don't know, we have our own rating scale. We rate into the moon into Saturn. I rate moons. Hannah rates in Saturns, just because we feel like the traditional star scale doesn't really encompass, you know, all of our vibes. And so this book I've been on a journey with this book because we've been through it so many times. And I don't know, there's something about it. I really do. I'm going to do it. I'm going to get this 5 moons because I cannot stop going back to it. I cannot stop going back to this book. I can't stop thinking about it. Ever since I first listened to it, I texted Hannah and you texted me and you were like, I can't stop thinking about this book. Well, and then I listened to it.
Yeah, because you'd be like in a reading slump and I'm like, listen to it. Like it'll get you back.
Yes. And I cannot stop thinking about it. And now that we've gone deep, I want to go even deeper in this book. I want to be in this world. I'm so interested in the decoding. And it feels maybe a little generous because I do have some overall issues with the book, but I'm rating this one purely on vibes and vibes alone.
Me too. 5 seconds all the way. The first time I listened to this, though, I will tell you, my power went out that night. And my dogs just started barking like crazy, and I heard like somebody talking outside the door, and I was freaked out.
Yeah.
I like called my husband. I was like, you have to come home immediately. And the power was out for like 45 minutes, but it was like, it was just not a good timing. But like, I feel like it made me like the book even more because it freaked me out that much that like just a normal bad storm power outage freaked me out. So yeah, 5 Saturns.
Yep.
Here it is.
I love that. It's so different. It was such a unique experience. And I understand why people didn't like it. I think that if you're in the camp of like us, where you kind of like puzzles and decoding things and all roads lead back to Nancy Drew, if you vibe with that, I feel like this will be a great read for you. But thank you all so much for joining us on our spooky season journey. We hope you have a great Halloween because Halloween is tomorrow if you're listening to this on release day. So happy Halloween. Hope everyone has a safe and happy holiday. But our next episode. Our next episode
is going to be great. Our next episode is our birthday week episode.
It sure is. So my birthday's on November 10th.
And mine's on the 11th.
So obviously we have to have a birthday episode. So this one drops on the 13th. So a couple days after our birthday. But we decided there are so many incredible deep dive podcasts out there on all of these fantasy series. Hannah and I just know that is not our vibe. We are not deep divers. Obviously, we've been recording for almost 2.5 hours and we have come to zero conclusions. We it's just not for us, but we do love the Sarah J. Maas universe and the Mossverse, however you want to say it. So our birthday episode, we are going to be discussing all things A Court of Thorns and Roses, Throne of Glass, and Crescent City. We do have a slightly deeper Crescent City episode with the Romantasy Reads podcast is our summer mixtape series. So if you want more into that, there will be spoilers for every series, but we are going to break them up into segments. So you will be able to skip through if you haven't read, let's say, Throne of Glass. We'll try our absolute best to give spoiler warnings ahead of time, but there are certain things that, will come up. But we're so excited. We're going to be playing some games, and there will be an extended version of this episode on Patreon where there will be some exclusive bonus behind the scenes and games and stuff that we will not be releasing to all listeners, just to our patrons.
Yes. So we can't wait because I got Britt into this world after she read Fourth Wing, and I'm like, girl, you got to read this. Like, you're going to love some of these characters. And she did. And so yes. I'm excited to really talk about it with you then.
Can't wait.
So I guess today's code word, though, I forgot to do that earlier. It's going to be old house.
Old house.
It's going to be old house.
Yes.
But yes, stay tuned for some more things dropping on Patreon along with our birthday episode in the future. So definitely join our Patreon so we can be with you more often.
So follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Patreon. It's only $5. We only have one tier on Patreon, but you can join at a free level, and we do give access to quite a few things at that free level just to say thank you.
Thank you all so much for joining us here as we decipher the old house, and we hope to catch you here soon. And keep reading with kindness, y'all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.